A busy night in the land of severe weather. We have showers, thunderstorms, and even a few tornadoes. Actually, more than a few tornadoes, from judging from all the tornado warnings I've seen this afternoon into this evening. We're going to see some strong winds and some showers on Wednesday, moving into the mid-Atlantic and Northeast, and also through the Southeast. We have the late week and weekend outlook, and so much more on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is brought to you by the folks at Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon. They're getting ready for winter, and so should you. They service the entire New York, New Jersey, Connecticut tri-state area with everything you need to make sure that you're in good shape this winter, like rock salt to melt it away, or mag ice pellets and flakes, Pellido, and other snow and ice melt products. You might need a new snowblower. You might need, just in case you lose power, flashlights, batteries, and, of course, how about a generator? Well, it's all there at Omni. 631-756-1125. Nowhere can you find better prices. And the website is
OmniTrueValue.com. And tonight, an active night in the south, and tomorrow, an active day up here in the mid-Atlantic and Northeast, Joe.
Somebody asked me today whether they said no. Actually, it was a comment on YouTube. Would they cancel the tree lighting? And I gave an unequivocal no. They're not going to. That tree is pretty well secure. I mean, the only thing I could imagine is if there were a situation where you had sustained winds of, say, 75 or 80 miles an hour or something, with gusts to 100, then maybe for safety reasons they would reschedule it.
I would have a tough. Yes, I would think that if we had winds expected that strong, and we did actually have winds that strong one November in 1950, the Great Appalachian Storm, which moved right along the spine of the Appalachians, I think, in parts of the tri-state area. There were actually, indeed, gusts of hurricane force with that storm, but nothing like that expected for first of all, the worst of tomorrow will be from about noontime to 6 o'clock, and that's when we should pick up a quickie, maybe 3/4 of an inch of rain, accompanied by winds which may gust out of the south and southwest at about 30 to 40 miles an hour. But just as the coverage begins on television for the 3 hours of entertainment leading up to the tree lighting tomorrow night at Rockefeller Center, the rain should be pretty well over and done with, I think, by at least 7 o'clock tomorrow night, and the winds will shift from south into the west and won't be quite so strong. It'll still be gusty, maybe 20, 30 miles an hour at times, but the bottom line of it is that it will be less windy, there will be no more rain, and in fact, the skies may even be clear or mostly clear by tree lighting time, so they're going to really luck out on this. And the worst part of the day, again, tomorrow, will be probably during the afternoon hours when the rain could come down at times rather heavily.
Well, we got some wind advisories up in a lot of the Northeast, especially across New England, and that is I don't think that we'll probably see anything upgraded beyond that. We'll look at where all this is in just a short time. In the meantime, I'm on the edge of some of these showers and storms, not the real heavy stuff. So I've already heard what's the usual, what sounds like the hail of bullets on the on the porch, on the roof happening. So we're bringing up Tornado HQ, which we don't use very often or haven't used it in a while. Certainly, there's not been a whole lot of severe weather going on. But from time to time during the month of November, and last year we saw it in the month of December, it's been pretty active, and you can see at the moment. We'll give it a quick refresh here and take a look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 active tornado warnings and another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 severe thunderstorm warnings. I mean, literally, I'm on the edge of this. So I'm right about trying to see where's the North Carolina state line and the Tennessee state line. I'm like, I'm Joe. I'm going to draw. That's a big circle. Okay, that's too much. I'll try to make just like a little dot. No, that's too far south. It's kind of like right. No, who knows? It's right there all the way up in the north corner, northeast Georgia, is where I am. So I'm just kind of on the edge of all of this, and running through some of these tornado warnings. I'm just seeing, just reading from the warnings at least. Uh, four of them are got one in Alabama, one in Arkansas. I'm sorry, one in Alabama. Um, AR is Arkansas? I forget. Is it AK or AR?
AK, I think, is Alaska.
AR, Arkansas. Yeah, it wouldn't be Alaska, obviously. We've got one in Mississippi, two in Mississippi, and here we go. One in Louisiana. The one in Louisiana is a tornado was reported near Columbia, moving northeast at 50 miles an hour. So I didn't even hear. I've never heard of these parishes here. Franklin, Madison, Tennessee. I mean, that sounds a little odd. Let me take a look. Hang on a second. Let's see if I can pull up. I'm going to try and pull that one up. And see on the full warning text here. So this is, well, it is. I'm sorry. It's been that long since I've been in Louisiana. I worked in southeast Louisiana. We didn't pay a whole lot of attention to what was going on in northern Louisiana. Northwest Tensas Parish in northeast Louisiana, southwestern Madison Parish in northeastern Louisiana, and Franklin Parish in northeast Louisiana. So I stand corrected. Okay, I stand corrected. They are in Louisiana. And you can see the thunderstorm area extends up into eastern Tennessee, just about bordering western North Carolina. Get a better view here on the full U.S. radar about what it's kind of disjointed. You got this sort of separate area here. You have the storm system. The actual low is running up through the Great Lakes. It's actually moving faster than models were advertising earlier, which is why I think for tomorrow we can get stuff in the Northeast, in eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. It gets in a little sooner, so it gets out a little faster, and hence the tree lighting will be probably when this is all done. But you've got the main storm system up to the north, and you've just got a bit of a gap in between. There's some showers and storms in eastern Wisconsin, down into east central Illinois, and then you have this separate area that is moving across the south and heading toward the northeast. Nothing's going to happen tonight, obviously, Joe, in the northeast and through the coastal mid-Atlantic, because the radars are quiet and it's still a ways away yet.
I would have said that yesterday, in fact, I did say yesterday, spotty. In other words, one or two places might have a shower or maybe a spot or two of drizzle after midnight tonight, but that does not look like it's going to happen now. I think the earliest that we could expect to see any kind of precipitation in the immediate tri-state area won't be until after 9 or 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, but then it really begins to rev up after about noon or 1 o'clock. And again, from about 1 o'clock to about 6 o'clock or thereabouts, that's when it will be coming down at a pretty good clip and may even be categorized as briefly heavy. I don't think that we will have enough lift or enough energy to mention the possibility for a thunderstorm or even a rumble of thunder in our area. That looks like it's going to be confined more to our south. But it does get mild out there tomorrow with temperatures. Well, today I was just barely able at about 2:30 this afternoon to touch 40 degrees. That was it. And then went back into the 30s again. But tomorrow, a big warm-up. Temperatures almost 20 degrees warmer, well into the 50s, up to near 60 degrees. And then after this whole line of mayhem moves through late tomorrow afternoon and evening, winds will shift into the west and a colder airflow will take hold. And it'll be bright on Thursday, bright and sunny, but temperatures will be back down only in the lower 40s. And that's going to make for an unseasonably chilly day. So the temperatures are doing doing kind of a pogo stick here, up and down, up and down. And we were down today. We'll be up tomorrow again in the New York area, maybe well into the 50s to near 60.
In the meantime, you can see SPC's risk. Storm Prediction Center got a couple of working tornado watches up in Alabama and Mississippi, extending back into northern Louisiana. There's a moderate risk of severe weather that was forecast, and that certainly has played out accordingly, as we saw on the radar, with a larger area of enhanced risk that pushes up into northwest Alabama and even a tiny portion of southern south central Tennessee. The slight risk a little further north into western Kentucky, and the marginal risk up into Indiana. And as Joe just correctly pointed out, SPC for tomorrow does not even have a chance for general thunderstorms. That area gets up into about northernmost North Carolina and then just cuts off. And you still have a marginal risk in central and southwest Georgia, southern Alabama, the Florida Panhandle, southern Mississippi, and into southeast Louisiana. So that's where the risk area and the thunderstorm area is confined. And then on Thursday into Friday, of course, it's all gone. You've got a couple of small areas where there's risk for thunderstorms in South Florida, northeast Texas, southeast Oklahoma, southwestern Arkansas, and also along the coast of the Pacific Northwest from northwestern California up the coast of Oregon to coastal Washington. And we have actually some busy weather there. There's a large area of moisture that's moving into colder air that is locked in place throughout most of Washington state. And in fact, the Weather Service, when we look at the watches and warnings, here's something you don't see too often, but as you know, if there's winter storm warnings up in the Northwest, you can see what the corresponding weather is here, or going to be in the east tomorrow, with temperatures racing up toward the 60-degree mark in some places. But we've got winter storm warnings up for just about all of Washington state. Seattle is under a winter weather advisory. There's a little streak of blue there, and that's Seattle's in that advisory area. But just about the entire rest of the state, northern and central Idaho, northwestern Wyoming, all under winter storm warnings. Also, the western half of Oregon, much of northwestern California, which I was looking at some of the forecasts there, Joe. The snow levels in some of those northwestern counties will be down to about or even under 2,000 feet, which is pretty low. And of course, you've got the warnings up in the Sierra Nevadas, but that's pretty low to go down about 2,000 feet in northwestern California.
It is. It is. You're more accustomed to seeing, if you're going to get, for example, in Southern California or Central California, the Sierra Nevadas, but they go up to, generally 5 to 8 or even 10,000 feet. 2,000 feet in California, anywhere in California, is pretty darn low. And of course, we have seen on very rare occasions snow even making it down to the surface in places like San Francisco, and I think once or twice it even happened in Los Angeles. But again, that is a rarity, but a bit of an anomaly with those low heights for freezing temperatures in the Golden State.
Yeah, we have some winter storm warnings up in southeastern Minnesota, northwestern Wisconsin, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. There's some winter weather advisories that surround that. Wind advisories in Michigan, down into Indiana, central Illinois, northwestern Ohio. We also have wind advisories up through much of New York State. They left you out, by the way, out of the wind advisory. The southern counties.
I noticed that.
I wonder whether they just figured, you know what? Why don't we wait till tomorrow morning to see what it looks like? If we have to put it up, we can put it up in those counties. They have it up for Long Island, southern and much of central New England, all under wind advisories for wind gusts of 40 miles an hour or so. I did notice some of the peak winds on the European model the last couple of days were trying to push the numbers up over 50 in some places, but that's probably at the top of the range with this. The low in Canada is steep, but it's a little further north. The gradient is tight, but maybe a little less tight than what it was showing just a couple of days ago. We also, because our buddy Alfred Phillips in Wainwright, Alaska, Joe, he's under a winter storm warning. So why don't we check that out? Let's see what they're doing here.
He was saying that the waters are still not frozen up where he is, which is interesting. I mean, normally now this late in the season, you would have anticipated that they would have frozen over by now, but no, it's been a balmy month, I think, in Alaska, the month of November, and so maybe they're going to try to make up for lost time in the next few days.
Well, right now, if Alfred's on tonight, he might be. I can't look at the chat board, so I can't see. 8 above zero where he is, Joe. 8 above zero with a southeast wind at 8, a cloudy sky, a dew point of -1, visibility 10 miles, a wind chill of -4, and the forecast is for them a 40% chance of snow, cloudy this afternoon with a high of 15. Snow tonight, Joe. Snow tonight after 9 p.m. and areas of blowing snow. Temperatures will rise to 24 by 3 a.m. with a southwest wind at 25 to 30 miles an hour.
Terrible heat wave.
Yes, a 100% probability new snow accumulation of about an inch. Snow on Wednesday, mainly before 3 p.m. and a high of 28. Southwest at 15 to 20. New snow accumulation around an inch. They've got snow in the forecast pretty much every day. In fact, on Friday night, they've got snow likely possibly mixed with freezing rain before coming all snow after 9 p.m. and a low of 21. So I mean, the temperature-wise, it's not except for the current temperature, which is 8 above. It's not particularly unreasonable where he is. And by the way, if you look at the map, you guys can see the map here on the upper right. Wainwright, Alaska. He's got he's got some kind of bay here, water, and Alfred's right on. He's somewhere in that green box is our buddy Alfred Phillips of Wainwright, Alaska. So we wish him well out of all of this. And I'm just going to read the winter storm warning. Winter storm warning says 4 to 7. Forecasting 4 to 7 inches. This includes rain white, Aquasuk. I thought that was a racetrack in New York. That's what we used to call Aqueduct anyway. Aquasuk, Point Lay, and Cape Lisburne. Winter storm warning remains in effect from 6 this evening to 6 on Wednesday. Heavy snows, 4 to 7, and winds gusting 40 to 70 miles an hour.
Good Lord, that's the dreaded horizontal snow.
Yeah, correct.
Wow.
All right, so let's look at some snow. And by the way, we have lake effect snow warnings up for when this thing goes by for north central New York and winter weather advisories for southwestern New York. I'm going to pull up the latest snowfall forecast map here. Now, they're going on the big map. This was just you have to really get close where that circle is to see what the max amounts are, as well as down in southwestern New York. This is not going to be a big deal. And elsewhere, where it might change over to some snow before it ends, we're looking at generally a coating to an inch. And you can see the snow amounts that forecasted in and around the Great Lakes. So some 1 foot amounts in the winter storm warning areas in northwestern Michigan on the Upper Peninsula. But really nothing that stands out in my mind looking at this. Now, out in the west, it's a whole different story with all those winter storm warnings up. We'll see how after the map loads. Up and down the mountains, Joe, up and down the Cascades, up and down the Sierra Nevadas. I mean, there's some big number prints here. 63 inches. I just saw a 63 there in Washington State and a 66. Now, they're going for about an inch in Seattle or a little bit less, but then just to the west of Seattle, it starts to go up to like 3, 4, 5, 6 inches. And then, of course, as you go up the mountains, the numbers get really big. But it's a solid snowfall all the way down. And even some areas where Portland's forecast to get a coating to an inch on this in Oregon and in Northern California. except along the immediate coast. You got some big amounts in some of those mountains there, running up to, here's a 50-inch print. You know what this is? This is the West's way of trying to outdo the lake effect that happened last week in southwestern New York. Also, some big amounts up in central and northern Idaho of up to several feet being forecast there, and up to a foot in parts of northwestern Montana. So the bottom line, folks, always with these things is when we look at where the snowfall is happening. If it's happening here in the west, particularly if it's happening in the northwest and near the northwest coast, it's a almost sure bet that there's very little from the standpoint of winter weather going on in the eastern part of the U.S.
Yeah, it's a big country, and a lot of people sometimes don't understand that. A lot of people think that and they say it's going to be a cold winter or a spell of cold weather. They think it's from coast to coast. That's rarely the case. Usually, when one region of the country is very cold, the other region is relatively mild. And when it's indeed, as you said, Joe, when it's cold in the west, it's usually near normal to at least mild, and sometimes even downright warm. Here in the east, that's exactly what we're looking at right now.
A slew of cold fronts coming through in the east over the next few days, actually more than the next few days, taking us into next week. So at least from this first round of showers for tomorrow, it looks like mostly a half to 3/4 of an inch of liquid. That seems pretty fair. It's going to come relatively quickly. You see down in the southern Appalachians and in the deep south, we're looking at some areas of 2 inches or more. Particularly in North Georgia. Kind of hope we get some of that heavy rain because it really hasn't rained very much at all in the last 3 months. This is the dry season across the South. We're coming to the end of the dry season now, so this rain is welcome, and I can hear it on the rooftops now. And in the Pacific Northwest, these are 2-day rainfall totals, by the way. The Pacific Northwest, liquid precip amounts of up to several inches or more. If we look at the 7-day rainfall totals, you can see that with the next couple of frontal systems moving through, looks like one on Saturday, maybe another system coming in early next week. We're looking at, you add it all together, it's about anywhere from 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches. In some places a bit more. You see a big red spot there in north central New York because some of that's lake effect. We've got big rains in Kentucky, southern Indiana, southern Illinois, Tennessee, northern Alabama, northern Georgia, of up to several inches in the next week, and also the Pacific Northwest getting pounded with heavy precip. And with regards to that lake effect I mentioned, just want to check out here. This is from the Weather Service in Buffalo. So this is through 7 p.m. Thursday. So you can see where the big snow amounts are. They are in north central New York, Pulaski 6 to 8, High Market 6 to 8, and there'll probably be a spot there in the orange near Tug Hill, where it'd be about 1 foot to 1.5 feet, 2 to 3 for Watertown. Then it's just basically a coating to an inch along and north of I-90. And then you go south and west of Buffalo toward Springville, Jamestown. That's when you start to get into several inches, 4 to 6, 6 to 8. That kind of looks like the max. Maybe there might be the odd spot that gets a little bit higher. And we can check out on the Ohio, Pennsylvania side here. Erie 4.4, Ashtabula 2.6, Mounts tail off to less than an inch in Cleveland. So a minor lake effect event here compared to what certainly compared to what they had. This is just a few flurries, really.
Yeah, this is everything is relative, Joe. Everything is relative, but yeah, compared to what they went through about 2 weeks ago, this is just a drop in the bucket for them, and they should be able to get through this quite quickly. But we still here in the tri-state area are sitting like either on the sidelines, or if you can think of winter weather as a stadium, we're not yet in the stadium. We're outside in the parking lot waiting to get in, or maybe what's inside the stadium is waiting to get out. But in any case, we haven't seen anything yet in terms of any significant snowfall, at least in the immediate. Actually, I should even correct myself there, because up where my daughter lives in the New Paltz area of Ulster County, they did have a bout of snow. They had about 2 or even 3 inches from localized heavy snow shower activity. That was about 2 weeks ago, too. So You have to be literally within the confines of the immediate New York City tri-state area, within 50 miles of New York, to be able to say, nope, still haven't seen anything yet. And it looks like we probably aren't going to see anything for the next week or 2 weeks, at least immediately in our immediate area, while everyone else, upstate and western New York, continue to get hit with occasional snow.
We are looking at the teleconnections here. We've been talking about the fact that we're going into a blocking pattern, and of course, whenever snow lovers hear blocking pattern, they start priming their sleds and their shovels. Well, sometimes it doesn't necessarily work out that way, and it's going to be I think it's going to be interesting to see how this all ultimately resolves itself, because there are a lot of things that are going on. And I've noticed there's been an especially larger amount of volatility from run to run. I think it has to do with the fact that anytime the North Atlantic oscillation reading goes negative, anytime we have blocking developing in the North Atlantic, for some reason the models just can't seem to handle the magnitude of that blocking or the position of the blocking, which is very important. Is it east base closer to Scandinavia? Is it west base or closer to Greenland? Because that's all the difference in the world in terms of what the weather could be like in the east. And we do have the NAO by the GFS and the European, and all the global models are pretty much in line here, going rather somewhat strongly negative in just a handful of days, really. We're going negative now. We're just a teeny tiny bit positive. On December 1st, it's right on the neutral line, and then it drops to about almost the standard deviation and a half from the mean, which is not too shabby. The issue is out in the west. The Pacific is really a problem here overall, because the model seems to be kind of vacillating back and forth on what to do with the West. And at the very least, we need to see this Pacific North America index if you want to get some early snow, if you want to get a sustained cold of some kind. The NAO will help, but you got to get this Pacific North America index to at least get back to the neutral line, which is what it was doing from time to time. It does that from time to time. The overnight runs actually keep the PNA mostly negative, and that is not favorable, because it doesn't help the cause with respect to trying to get cold air into Western Canada. The higher pressures in the Northeast Pacific that you like to see, because that helps to spread cold air out across North America. Well, it's been kind of one run it's there, one run yes, one run no. And the GFS, just looking at this, now you see the system in the southwest that was kicked out on Sunday and kicked out to the northeast. Now here comes the second trough here that's swinging out of the plains and moving into the eastern part of the United States. So we're going to get a quick shot of cold air for Thursday and Friday, but notice there's deep troughing in the west, a kind of a flattish ridge in the Gulf of Mexico that sits there. And, Joe, there's an upper low that forms up just west of Hudson Bay that kind of tries to swing around and move the trough to the east in about 7 or 8 days. You can see the blocking is there. That's not a question here. I mean, the blocking's going to be there. So right up in here is all higher than normal pressures. So there's your negative NAO. And you do have a little bit of a ridge up in the northwest. So this is sort of this is a negative EPO, but not a big negative EPO. It's a weak negative East Pacific oscillation, but we do have a cold flow. This will come around December 6th and 7th, going into the eastern part of the United States. After that, I mean, the block holds, but you've got all this troughing from the Arctic across Alaska down through Western Canada, and that kind of wants to make the ridge, the southeast ridge tries to pop up, but then eventually it does sort of lose it. You see the low that gets down into Newfoundland. It's very, very complicated. And going back to yesterday, Joe, it's not showing that ridiculously weird block with the low that came from the ocean and backed all the way
Yeah.
westward and southwestward. I mean, that was one of the strangest things I've ever seen the model do. And I'm not necessarily convinced that this is going to look this way or anywhere close to this, but I do think that at least from the standpoint of the NAO and the blocky nature of the pattern, that I think is going to be a constant once it gets established in the next few days. I think that's going to be a constant there for the next 2 weeks. It's a matter of whether the other areas can change their profiles here in the longer range.
As I said last night, I think it may take a good part of December for that block to really begin to maintain itself or to increase its persistence, if you will, across the polar regions. But I do believe that when we get into January, that block is going to play a big role in setting the stage for a prolonged or protracted spell of unseasonably cold weather. I don't know about snow so much. I suspect that we are going to see some snow eventually or inevitably in January, but I don't expect it to be, major. I don't expect it to be one of these massive 6 or 8 or 10 or even 1 foot plus type systems. But I do think we're going to see a lot of cold weather. In fact, maybe some of the coldest weather we've seen in this part of the country for a good number of years. I don't know exactly when it was that I think it was something like 2010 or 2012 when Central Park hit 0 degrees or went below zero.
Well, it got to -2 on Washington's birthday. I want to say, was it 2016 or 2018? One of those years. It was on Washington's birthday weekend. I think it was 2016 because I was up in New Hampshire for that.
Yeah,
and it was -15 up there with a screaming 40-mile-an-hour wind. So Central Park, I think, got to 1 below zero on that Washington's birthday.
So it's been a while, and it's been a long time in coming. But I think in January we are going to see, and as I mentioned yesterday, also, and we've talked about this, some of the coldest weather we see comes with a wind that comes straight down from the north. And we saw that briefly happen at the end of January last year. I think we're going to see a much longer, a prolonged or protracted spell of very cold weather in January. But it's going to take a little while for us to build toward that. But I think we will see us building toward colder and colder weather as we move on through the month of December. And I think, again, January will be one of the colder months we've had in quite a few years.
By the way, I'm looking at on Pivotal Weather, I have the European Ensemble, which is much different than the GFS in a lot of ways. In fact, it's a smoother look in terms of going from day to day. But one thing I'm noticing here, Joe, is that it has I can't see beyond the West Coast, but there's you get down, we get out into the long range here. So right now, I'm at 216 hours, and this is the 8th of December. Look how low the heights are. Look how you got this ridge up the West Coast all the way up. You've got troughing in the east. And this is cold.
Is that one of the what you're seeing over Hudson Bay? Is that one of the split vortices that
probably that's certainly reflected at 500. Looks like there's a vortex in Hudson Bay. See, the GFS wants to let you think that upper low in around the same time frame is actually west of Hudson Bay, and it comes down more in the west first. The European is different. The European's got a much further east shift. I want to check the GFS too to see. I've been talking about the fact that there's been a lot of tropical feedback on the GFS from time to time in the last 2 weeks. I looked at it earlier. I did not see any tropical systems being developed in the Caribbean because that when that happens, then there's a strengthening of a Gulf of Mexico ridge or a southeast ridge. The European's got a much colder look at 216, and then going forward, even out to the end of the period here, I mean, it's got basically ridging in the west and troughing here in the eastern United States. So it's kind of, the European is usually the one that wants to make it warmer as you go into the long range, and it's not doing that here. So I think the jury's here is out. Beyond whatever happens in the next week in the short range, I think the jury is still out as we get into the month of December. This is December 14th on the last frame here. So this goes out 360 hours.
Well, again, I think what's going to happen is that we'll see the euro and the GFS, and let's throw in the Canadian, if you will. They're not going to be all on the same page more often than not in December. But I really think that everything is going to come together, and I think most models, we get into January, we're going to be seeing again some really cold weather envelop much of the eastern and central U.S. Maybe the western United States will be the one spot that'll be on the mild side because they're underneath the ridge. But I honestly believe that we're going to be looking at much colder weather as we move into January. So again, some of the coldest weather we've had in a while. But during December, I think more often than not, we're going to be seeing a lot of differences between the models, among the models, and the positioning of the various upper level, disturbances and vortices and whatever.
Well, whenever there's a block, there's more volatility than usual, and that's what I think we're seeing right now in how each run plays this all out.
Right. I really don't. I just get the idea, and I mentioned this last night, that I think January, surely because it's going to be, colder than normal, we'll see some snow. I don't expect a monstrous snowfall, but maybe we'll see a few of those 2 to 4 or 3 to 5 inch snowfall amounts falling. And also March, which the last 2 years, this is the third year of La Nina for the winter season. But unlike the last 2 Marches where we've had just a trace of snow or very little snow, I think March will come in with a few potential snow threats or winter storm threats. And in fact, Joe, according to the folks over at CPC, Climate Prediction Center, this La Nina may actually begin to let go a bit or may begin to diminish a bit once we get past the middle or latter part of February. So maybe it will not be a full-fledged entire winter of La Nina weather. Maybe things will begin to diminish some in that department, and maybe that might allow for a more active and maybe a more volatile weather period coming up in March of this year, as opposed to the last 2 years in March, which again were relatively quiet.
I've been playing with the ensemble snow maps here, and when you look at, on the European anyway, if you look at the 2 weeks, the 2 week snowfall, it does have some snow toward if I want to use the days, I guess somewhere between day 11 and day 14, somewhere in there. This is the snowfall profile from the European ensemble. Now, these maps are just reflecting whatever the models are doing, so they really don't have any forecast value other than, I guess we could call it eye candy for everybody. But at least it does reflect the fact that the models, the European model in particular, has a colder profile. It seems to be handling the Pacific differently than the GFS is. So that's an interesting development. You can look at the ensemble on the GFS. The block is there. Pretty much the higher pressures in the North Atlantic are all there through the next the next 2+ weeks. It does start to show ridging in the west developing in the longer term. It just gets long. It takes longer to get there because it still has some residual troughing off the west coast. So again, it's all speculative right now. Pretty much any of us could say anything we want about what's going to happen. The only thing I will say is that there's a very high probability that everybody will be wrong. and we'll just kind of leave it there at that. Here's what we can look at on the shorter range. I think I'll use to show the full U.S. view so we can see what's going on for our friends out in the western part of the United States. You see that storm moving inland there, the storm in the western lakes. And we're in this flow where these weather systems just keep moving along. Here's tomorrow. The gradient is tight for about a 6 to 8 hour period, and as well as the showers. You can see how quickly this is at 7 a.m., this is at 1 p.m., and this is at 7 p.m. By 7 p.m. on the GFS, it's just west of Boston to eastern Long Island is the back edge of the rain, and the winds have already shifted to the northwest. So your timing is perfect. There's a 975 low near James Bay. In the west, the first surge of precip moving in now. There's another surge that comes in Wednesday night into Thursday. That drops down into the Rockies. You see it there, then moves through the Central Plains. The low goes to the Western Lakes. And here comes another front. Now, this is for Saturday, so we got a quick cold shot for Thursday. I thought Thursday, Joe, most places probably are going to stay in a range of low, maybe highs, mostly low 40s. Maybe a few places might even not, get to 40. And then nudge it up a little bit on Friday which should be a nice finish to the week. Then it looks like we'll get to some showers on Saturday. And here comes another system into the west. And then that goes out. Sunday, definitely the better of the 2 weekend days throughout much of the eastern part of the United States. And then here comes some rain for later Monday night and Tuesday as another low and front swing out of the Central Plains and moves up into New England. And I think behind that you get maybe a more potent shot of colder air for the middle and latter part of next week. Things are just moving along, and that's kind of what you see a lot of the times in the month of November and into the first part of December.
Yeah, well, I said for tomorrow temperatures, and this is for the Hudson Valley now, temperatures within a degree or two of 58, but then I got a big drop off for Thursday, saying despite sunshine, highs no better than 46, maybe only 41. But when you factor in winds gusting to over 25 miles an hour, that could mean chill factors well down in the 30s, even the 20s on Thursday. So a big change between what we'll see tomorrow versus what we'll see on Thursday. Temperatures may recover back to the upper 40s on Friday. I've got showers developing by the afternoon hours on Saturday, but unseasonably mild. The normal high now for the Hudson Valley is somewhere around 50. And so you get to 55, as I think we will on Saturday. That is a mild day, but it's also going to be kind of cloudy and maybe a little wet during the afternoon. I agree with you. Sunday is the better and brighter day with lots of sun, although the breeze may be rather gusty in the morning. Upper 40s on Sunday, maybe more showers on Monday, and then a few more showers on Tuesday. By Tuesday, we may recover back to the middle 50s. So, again, it's been up and down, up and down. We have not had any prolonged or protracted spell of either mild weather or chilly or cold weather. If it gets mild, it'll be mild for a day or two. If it gets cold or chilly, it'll be that for a day or two. Whatever you get, you'll know that within a few days, it will be warming or cooling off, depending upon your perspective.
Izzy D hitting Super Chat tonight. Thank you, Izzy. Appreciate the kind words. For those of you who didn't see it, you can find it on the my YouTube channel on the library. Last night's show with Bill Goodman and Tony Gigi. Tony from retired from National Weather Service in Mount Holly. Bill Goodman from National Weather Service in Upton, New York. Talking about the winter. So if you missed the show, it's there in the library. Robert Hill tonight gets, I think, the Reuben Fairchild Award for the silliest comment, I think. I'm sorry, Robert, it's silly. If you're going to say no more classic East winters, I don't even know what that means. Joe, do you know what that means? Honestly, do you know what that means? I don't know what that means. No more classic East winters ever again. Move northwest, you never see them here. That is just that really is, I think, one of the most ridiculous statements I've seen in a long, long time. But, you're playing the climate change card, so I'm not going to get into it. And that's that.
I wonder, Robert,
that's just
Robert,
silly.
He's talking about you'll never see a classic East winter here. Snow will be a thing of the past. Al Gore. Oh, God, yeah. Tell that to the people who live in Atlantic City, who last year, and that's just a stone's throw from Philadelphia,
Yeah.
and that I get that guy, and that category is categorized as a place in the Mid-Atlantic, I guess, right?
Yes.
Atlantic City, and they had what? They had 35 inches of snow last year, one of their snowiest winters ever.
And
tell that to them.
Or the folks in the Carolinas, which also got clobbered, a few times. If I recall, in the last couple of years, the snows have been coming into the southeast rather early. That's just a really, that's one of those statements that I don't even know how to describe it. Forget it. Let's just leave it alone. Leon Probitsky hitting super chat. Also, I know you hit it last night too. I think, Leon, and I may not have acknowledged you, so thank you very much for doing that. Somehow, Joe. Somehow, I think there's this view, because it's never been the case. If you're not old enough to remember, if you're not old enough like Joe and I are, who know what the winters were like in the 70s and 80s and 90s, they in our neck of the woods in the Northeast, around the coastal areas of New York City and New Jersey and Long Island, as snow lovers, they were horrible. Okay, there's 30 years of subpar snowfall. Okay, and by the way, here's another thing, Mr. Hill. If that's the case, how is it that the average snowfall in almost all the major cities up and down the East Coast, particularly in the Northeast, has gone up? And gone up by as much as 50% in some places in the last 20 years. Can you explain that, or do statistics don't matter? Okay, maybe statistics just don't matter. It's how you feel. You feel that the classic winters were over.
I mean, and the number of snowstorms in the New York metropolitan area, where we've seen snow accumulations in excess of 15 inches. Or even 20 inches. And we broke in 2016 the all-time record for snowfall in the New York area in Central Park, beating the old record. It was 27.5 inches. And the old record, Joe, was set just a few years earlier with something like 26 and a half or 27. And we were in a long stretch between 1947 and the early part of the 21st century where we had never seen snowfall attain amounts of 25, 26 inches in New York. And all of a sudden, we got blitzed. I think there was something like 3 or 4 winters in the early part of this century where we've had 20-plus inches of snow. That never happened during the times when, we were living in the Bronx in the 60s, the 70s, 80s. And yet people say, well, what about the blizzard of 78? What about the blizzard of 83? Yeah, admittedly, we did have a couple of big snowstorms in 1978, but most of that decade was we saw a paucity, a very small amount of snow. Those were the exceptions. That particular year, 1978. In 1983, again, a major snowfall, but most of the 80s too, not much. Everything started to change, I think, or everything started to turn around after about 1996. Then all of a sudden, we went into this pattern that we're into still to this day, where we have seen amazing snow amounts in certain years. I remember, Joe, December. December was a year where, it's December. Well, we're not going to get much in for Christmas or whatever like that. Now, all of a sudden in December, you check it out. The last 20 years, December has been a major snow month. I don't know about this upcoming month of December, but we've seen Decembers in the last 20 years 5 inches, 10 inches, for God's sake, 20 inches of snow. That never happened.
The Boxing Day storm.
Exactly. Exactly.
The one that was it the year before or the 2 years before, around December 19th, December 20th, was also another 20 incher. Look, here's the bottom line, though, Joe.
Wait a minute.
You finish.
If our dear friend is saying thanks to global warming, and he brings up Mr. Gore, and he's saying things like we're never going to see a winter like that. I might point out that actually climate change and global warming might be one reason why New York has seen so much more
Yes.
snow in the last 25 years. Because if the atmosphere has warmed up, as we all know, at least we hope we know, the warmer the atmosphere is, the more moisture it can hold. And if you have more moisture and get hit with occasional bouts of cold weather, you're going to create a lot more snow. And that's exactly what has happened in the last 25 years. A function or an artifact, perhaps, of global warming or climate change has been the increase in snow here in the northeastern United States. So if you're saying that because of global warming and climate change, winter is never going to come to the northeastern United States, or we're going to see a lot less snow, that's pure, unadulterated malarkey. And you're talking to two guys who have atmospheric science degrees. What's your degree, my friend, to make that absurd claim that we're never going to see cold weather in winter here in the Northeast again?
Look, I just simply say, show me the numbers that here's the bottom line. Show me the numbers that state your case, okay? And you can't. Well, we could have two conversations here. We could talk about cold, or we could talk about snow, okay? And we both know that they don't necessarily go together in the sense that you could have a cold winter and a snowy winter do not have to go hand in hand. We've seen that happen a number of times. So show me the numbers that support what you say. That it's very simple. Just go to Asheville, North Carolina's website, National Climatic Center in Asheville, North Carolina. Pull up the data and show me in the Northeast cities, big and small, what the snowfall trend has been. In fact, you don't even have to do that. You go to the various cities and pull up their climate data and look at what the mean snowfalls have been. They've all been going up. And New York City went from 20 inches in the 30-year mean from 1970 to 2000. Now it's up at 30. Okay. Boston, I can't remember off the top of my head. I think Boston's went up by 6 or 7 inches. They've all pretty much either they've stayed the same or they've increased, and in some cases increased it substantially. So you know what? No. They don't, and you're right. It could very well be, because if you make the case that the warming that has occurred, the greatest warming has occurred up in the Arctic region. Well, if that's true, and it is, I mean, the data does show that, then there's a tendency for you can make the argument that the polar vortex will be weaker in the stratosphere, and that you would have more cold air spreading out, maybe more blocky patterns. We've had our fair share of those in the last 20 or so years. So anyway, it's a pointless conversation. So we're right, he's wrong. That's it.
Thank you, Izzy G, for hitting the chat board tonight. And he says, Joe, I should take a closer look at the chat board. I don't understand exactly what he means by that, but
well, he did say about the idea that the El Nino or La Nina, using the phrase in terms of overall impact, as being vastly overrated. It might be something that maybe people point to too much. I've just said, it's a factor, but it's not the only factor. There's other stuff going on, and we have to take that into account. So,
but when the Climate Prediction Center makes their annual winter forecast, what more do they fall back on? The only thing they can fall back on that I suppose they think that the general public understands is El Nino or La Nina or La Nada, a year when we don't have either an El Nino or a La Nina. I've never seen, at least in recent years, them giving them an explanation as to why they're going for what they're going without injecting into the discussion the ENSCO or the La Nina, El Nino discussion as to what is expected or what anticipated. And then, of course, they bring up their maps projecting what they expect for the next 3 months, but also they bring up the map that shows you what a typical El Nino or a La Nina winter looks like, and say, well, this is if it's going to be an El Nino or an La Nina, this is what we're anticipating will happen if it normally. But don't forget, Joe, what was it, about 3 or 4 years ago, we had a year, I think it was supposed to be an El Nino year, but it didn't resemble an El Nino year at all. or maybe it was a year where we had no El Nino or no La
Right.
Nina.
Yeah,
And
there was exactly. It was supposed to be there was nothing. No La Nina, no El Nino, and so all the all the snow forecasts were for uh, apocalyptic snows from November to April, and I think that might have been 20. Maybe which one was it? 2019, 2020, which wound up being the first below normal year we had after a 6 above normal snowfall years in a row,
right.
as I recall.
Was that the year we at Central Park had only had 5 inches for the whole
No,
winter
no, that
season?
was no. It had more than that. I think it got to like 20.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it got to 20. No, it was 11 and 12. That was the whole Northeast hardly saw any snow with that. That was a super La Nina year, if I recall. Justin Vale asking me the weather over me tonight. I'm on the edge of those thunderstorms. I'll probably get some thunderstorms. By the time they get to me, though, they'll probably weaken some. So I don't think I'm going to get the severe stuff. I may get a sizable amount of rain, and it certainly has been windy here this evening. But I'm not. I'm not in any kind of watch box here up in Northeast Georgia. So anyway, on that particular note, now that everybody knows that I'm safe, I think we can say goodbye for the night. Mark Barrera says, "This is why I freaking love watching you guys. You can tune into the Weather Channel or any local news network, and they always throw in the global warming comment." Well, you know what? If you can't explain something, it's a very convenient thing to grab onto and say, "Well, it's got to be this." Okay? It has to be global. Whatever it is, it's too hot,
Right.
it's global warming. It's too cold, it's global warming.
Right.
Everything, it's all that. It's normal. It's not supposed to be normal because it's supposed to be either too hot or too cold. That's not normal.
And I love Al Roker. I've been watching Al for over 40 years. He's one of my favorite people. But there was one time when there was a spell of unseasonable warmth in the winter season. I forget which one it was, and they had Al on the NBC Evening News, and he said this is all due to global warming and climate change. And then, like 2 or 3 weeks later, we had unseasonably cold weather, and it was frigid, and we had snow and everything else. They brought Al Roker back up, and Al Roker said, and this is definitely due to global warming. And I'm staring at the TV set, and I just started yelling at Al. I mean, it's totally out of place for me. But I said, Al, 3 weeks ago you said global warming when it was warm. Now you're saying global warming when it was cold. You can't have it both ways, Al. It can't always be the answer, the buy-all answer to everything. Al, what are you talking about? And you're right, Joe. That's what they all fall back on during times of anomalous weather, be it very cold or very warm. I'm sure tomorrow, in the aftermath of these horrendous tornadoes and convective weather that we're seeing tonight down in the deep south, I'm sure you're going to see at least one weather expert say, well, this is definitely due to global warming. And again, it's not like we've never seen thunderstorms and even tornadic activity this late in the season or this early in the winter season. It has happened before. It's going to happen again. But now they have something that they can explain it away with, and that's global warming and climate change.
It's the lazy way out. It really is. It's in my view, it's the lazy way out. Anyhow, that's enough of that tonight. We're going to go now. Okay?
Yep.
All right, one more question. This gets away into a different type of conversation. Joe, short answer to this question for Johnny Quest, because I want to go have my glass of wine and smoke my cigar. There's been an unusually low amount of Alberta clippers in the past few years. And the answer to that is?
Well, if we don't have any outbreaks of very cold air, which usually are introduced into our neck of the woods, our part of the country, the Great Lakes and northeastern states, by clipper systems that slide on down the continental divide in western Canada, the United States, and then sweep across through the Great Lakes and into the Northeast. I mean, if you don't have those kind of systems to pull in those surges of cold air, you're not going to see very many Alberta clippers to begin with. So that's probably the reason why we haven't seen it. Now, if we do have if what I say is true, and if by January we have an outbreak, a prolonged outbreak of cold weather, the prolongation of cold weather is due to one clipper after another clipper after another clipper helping to reinforce that cold air. So maybe, just maybe, we just might see the return of the clippers in January, and that also might induce snow. Not tremendous snows. You don't usually get heavy-duty snows from Alberta clippers, but every so often, 2 to 4 inch snows followed by a surge of cold air. Then it warms up a little bit. Then another clipper comes in with another few inches, and then another surge of cold weather. So maybe, just maybe, we'll see if what I've worked out in my mind and on paper comes to fruition. Maybe we'll see more of the. Maybe that's what. Maybe that's what some people refer to as an old-fashioned winter, Joe. Cold and snow frequently moving across the region. But maybe we'll see some of that in January. We'll see.
We'll see. All right, folks. Tomorrow night back at 7:35. Hope to see you then. Thanks for those of you who hit the tip jar. We'll see you tomorrow. Night.
Good night, all.